Once upon a time, I had a child. I named him Joseph.
This young man grew up hard, not unlike some of your own children. Grew up on the lower northwest side of Detroit, Ferry Park, 14th, 12th, Linwood. Broken home. Mama young, daddy young. Grew up on the streets. The streets were his mentor. What was his father?
He didn't want to stand up and face his responsibilities as being a father.
He terrorized people. He was terrible.
When I turned to the left, I saw gangbangers. I saw guys selling dope. And then to the left of me, I see prostitutes. I see pimps. For an 8-year-old, his hero is Spider-Man, Superman. My hero is Killer Mike. So when I become a gang member, it's a direct result because I see Doc Strange gang banging on the block every day. I'm basically signing up to destroy my neighborhood. Because I'm trying to be filthy fucking rich. I'm trying to be the drug kingpin around this bitch.
We had did some shit to them. The niggas was mad, so they came up to the church shooting up at the church. Now, what type of nigga shoot up at the church?
On the charges that Joseph was convicted for, I would have to say that Joseph didn't have nothing to do with that case.
Yusef found himself imprisoned for a crime he did not commit.
I'm fighting like every other week. I've been in the hole 7, 8 times. I said I was lonely. I was homesick. Throughout my life, I'd always been searching to these answers to these questions. So when he writes me back, I feel the love. I feel the warmth. It jumps off. The things that I've been searching for, things that I've been yearning for, I feel in his letters.
Redemption Road is a gripping and authentic narrative of conflict, vulnerability, struggle, and atonement.
This is how we made our work
I come from me in the stand. I'm in the field and you just sit in the stands. Take that bass out your voice. If you ain't got no gun in your hand, I do what I want. And you don't even do what you can, you do what you told. I got no love for my foes. They can mimic my delivery and copy my prose. But what they can't comprehend is how I stick to this code. It's either in you or not. It's not the kicks and the clothes. They ain't cut from the same cloth. Can't come from the same loom. Fit in similar shapes or even sit in the same room. Confusing authenticity with part of the costume. I'm teaching gifted children. You can't come in this classroom.
Dare to struggle, dare to win.
Yo, welcome. Episode 3, Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win. It's your boy Geechee, y'all. Here with Yusef. That man you saw in that film. How you doing, bro?
What up, though, man? I'm fair for a nerd.
Yeah, fair for a nerd. Yeah. Revolutionary nerd.
Absolutely.
Yo, man. We want to welcome y'all to Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, where we bringing y'all a Black radical analysis from community movement builders' vantage point. I'm in the Atlanta chapter. My brother Yusef. Yusef. I'm calling you Yusef and Yusef. Yusef in the D. And we love being here home on Black Liberation Media Network. And we already know everybody in the chat, as we said every time. Y'all already radicalized. Y'all already have your politics all in line. But we need y'all to copy that link, share it with some of your people who also needs to have more of a radical analysis, especially as it relates to public housing, rental, real estate, all those other things. Make sure you share that link so that we can bring them in the chat to have more of a, little struggle radical analysis. What's up, man? Tell us more about that film, man. I see that film got some little dope lines up in there.
The film is Redemption Road. The journey of my transformation from a Zone 8 thug to a father and revolutionary, dealing with the dynamics of urban decay, gentrification, but more importantly, it tells that the story that's still being told of what it means to come home from prison. Again, unfortunately, mass incarceration has impacted Black families and folks in this country for multiple generations. And what does it look like to come out? And not only to come out, but to be able to not just survive, but to get to a point to live. And that's very hard, having that stigma, being socially rejected. So it's a film that's going to hit you in your heart. I was just actually in Denton, Texas, where it won the honorable mention for best film category, or best documentary category and things. And then it'll be in the Toronto film festival up in Toronto, and then Rhode Island later this year as well.
That's what's up. So in a few, we're gonna be joined by the Miss Akira Drake Rodriguez, and she's gonna talk a little bit about public housing and things like that. So I'm curious, even as you talk about your story, what's the relation to the projects or public housing or stuff like that? You have experience analysis or even your relation when you think about your story?
That's dope. Not directly. Detroit had some of the similar to Chicago and other urban centers. You had the Brewster projects. It's another one I can't think of right now. They tore it down in Detroit. Like this one here, it was so notorious, similar to a lot of projects in urban cities. Like the police didn't come into them. But I'm pretty sure, as we're going to learn in the discussion of this book, they become in the overhouse environments, politically distraught, and then as the author identifies, at some point they become headed by Black women as a household, right? And then the children, particular sons, are getting caught up in what I call streetaholics. So this is a recipe of self-destruction because as a result of the oppression. Again, I didn't grow up in anything like that per se, but the ghetto life, and I'm using that word loosely, right? Because of what it produced. It produced a level of some bad motherfuckers. And I say bad motherfuckers, from a street standpoint, drug dealers, gangsters, thugs that have, and I don't give a fuck where you at in the United States of America. They've all produced those type of images of individuals, but we celebrate those individuals, but because we don't understand our oppression, we get lost in that or ignore that, and it's like chasing the American dollar or the American dream. Sorry for that, but we don't understand as Black folks who are oppressed. Like when you grow up poor, and you're like, shit, man, I gotta get out this poverty. I gotta get out this from being poor, and easy access to that is selling dope, is robbing. But who you selling your dope to?
Right.
That look just like you. Who you robbing? People that look like you. You kill or become a hitman. Who you killing and hitting? People that look just like you. As Malcolm, who's behind me, said, the greatest crime that America has ever committed against Black people was to teach to hate ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as we tell you about the flow today, the good sister will be on shortly, and we'll have a conversation around her book. We'll talk more about it in a second. But then towards the end, this week's highlight, we're going to be talking to our comrade Yafeo from Dallas chapter, the Dallas lead, and get into some of the work that they got going on the ground, some of the programs they got. So jam-packed show. We're only going to be here for an hour 15, hour 30. That's all we can get y'all tonight, as we always do. But yeah.
So I got a question for you, though, good brother.
Yeah, what's up?
For tonight's topic, you selected it. What inspired you to select this topic? What is it about the author, particularly? Because we just ain't inviting anybody on. That made you want us to have discussion with this sister.
Yeah, so some of the research that I'm engaged in Atlanta.
Are you a researcher, man? I didn't know you was a researcher.
I mean, I do a little research. I do a little shit. But yeah, some of the research I'm doing is just trying to figure out the layout of the land of Atlanta, power struggle. And so prior to meeting this sister, I was reading Red Hot City, and it talked about how the Atlanta corporate urban regime, which is Black lawmakers, influenced by white dollars, pretty much selling out the city. So Maynard Jackson really started it, but Andy Young, he's up for sale as well. But as I was learning about and studying through that part, like I came across Akira's work because she was quoted multiple times, and then it kind of made me dive in to what she got going on, listen to a couple of lectures, and then me and her, had a couple meetings where we kind of talk about the work she's doing in Philly and connected to what we're doing in Atlanta. She has a deep knowledge and experience around land trusts. And so, we've been in communication, connecting each other to do different people. But I said, like, yo, we're going to have to bring you on to talk about this book, because I already kind of started reading through her book. Haven't finished it fully, but yeah, I just think she has a lot to say, not only in this, but, in movement work in general. She knows some of her stuff. So looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, some of my deep dive as you introduced me to the subject and me preparing myself for not only to see her as an author, a researcher, but also she's using a very unique lens or intersecting a radical, revolutionary type of viewpoint, which is not always done. Like you can be an intellectual, but not necessarily be a radical. So definitely want to recognize that. And then in particular, some other things I want to share now with to our guests come on, that from a the surface level that I've been introduced, and it actually speaks to some of the research I did in my dissertation and where I'm at in terms of understanding the dynamics of black life in urban America as a result of analyzing our conditions with the present state of gentrification, de-investment. So I think it's gonna be a dope topic, dope conversation.
So Raul's pasta sauce said, I already have a question about them, and the guest isn't even here yet. Oh. What's the question? Go ahead, put the question in there. I mean, maybe we can rotate it in.
Right.
We can start it. Yeah. But yeah, what else y'all got going up there in the Detroit, man? And you, I don't know if we got time to get in it towards the end, but we start talking. Yeah, what else y'all got going on in Detroit? And then I want you to kind of expound on something you said in one of our sessions.
Man, just building we're talking about chapter wise, just building the chapter out, man. Put some rules, protocols in place. I think a lot of organizations would go faster in our preparation, but sometimes you got to step back for preparation. I think a lot of times we want to be in organizations, and we look at organizations through the lens of a Black Panther Party, through the lens of SNCC, and particularly the Nation of Islam, the ones that really captivated our mind, but we negate the level of work. And some of that work is struggle and trying to find our rhythm, our chemistry. We adopt these phrases from the past, serving the people, helping them, just the slogans, but what does they mean on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how to relate to the person next to you, how can you serve the people?
I think it's because we've been brothers for a while that you knew what I was about to ask, but that was that's what I was about to ask. Like, yeah, when you said it, I was like, damn, we're gonna have to struggle with that, and we're gonna have to struggle that around chapters, but not bringing the Panthers into the 21st century, and knowing that we have like a lot of young people in our organizing or in these spaces where sometimes, as you were saying, we romanticize who these people were, how they were, and then instead of understanding why they build the programs and use that analysis to build our programs to move and win the hearts and minds of the people, we end up mimicking them and constantly saying we are them, we are modern day them. Right. So, like, as we wait for our guests to pop in, like, what are you saying when you say, like, we can't bring the Panthers in the 21st century?
What I mean by that is it's the same thing that was said in the 50s and the 60s. Like, we can't import revolution from Cuba. We can't import revolution from China. Two different social conditions. And I get it. Like, I mean, I was stuck in that phase when I read about Bunchy Carter, Fred Hampton, George, and et cetera. Right? They're very captivating in things. But when we try to bring the Panthers into the 21st century, we're actually limiting ourselves and doing a disservice to our organizing. One, the conditions are not the same. Two, the parents fail. And when I say that, is no indictment on them. And many of our organizations has failed because we're not free yet. We're not liberated. So to bring in a failed system is setting ourselves up for failure. It's like if you're going to build, like you wouldn't go, the house that burned down, you wouldn't go use those blueprints, or the house that the wind knocked down. You need to build better blueprints. You need to examine, what contribute to for allow it to burn down or to get blown over. And that's what I mean by, and not saying some of these individuals have not studied. And I was just talking to Harold Taylor. He was a member of the LA chapters, and we talk often. He started up under the leadership of Bunchy Carter. And I was like, man, what do we do about these folks trying to bring the parents in the 21st century? He's like, they call me Bunchy. He's like, hey, Bunchy, you right, man. You right on. We can't, because we got to grow. It's important that we learn from history, but not try to repeat history. You talking, good brother? You're on mute.
Bad, I'm muting. See, Akira she made me nervous. She came in the background. I started talking quick. Okay. But no, we was having this conversation about like history repeating itself, or does it rhyme? Because we had that conversation as it relates to things that happened to Uhuru movement and just the misinformation and the suppression of information that is constantly going, and some of the fights that we are still struggling. I know Daruba says a lot of times that we are fighting in fights that we already won, but as you said, those gains or those wins could also be redacted, or we can lose some of them gains. So it's important for us to recognize the times that we in. But so we're gonna take a really quick break and bring our guests up. We want you to take some time and grab a drink, grab some snacks, go take a bathroom break, and then we'll be right back with our guests. So appreciate y'all stick tuned.
I'm throwing copper at the coppers, but I'm shaking like Morocco. Say my prayers with the pistol, serve the sinners with the chopper. All my buddies got it from scratch. My house had Betty Crocker. His mama owned D. He ain't even get no shot up. Profit is invisible. Profit come from product. He think it buffet. He can't comprehend no potluck. God bless the child with his own powder to rock.
So we're back with Sister Akira Rodriguez. Sorry about that. And I'm gonna give a brief introduction, but I like for people to introduce themselves because I know I can't do you much justice. But she's an assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania, Weitzman School of Design. Her research examines the ways that disenfranchised groups reappropriate their marginalized spaces in the city to gain access to and sustain urban political power. She is also the author of Diverging Space for Deviants, the politics of Atlanta's public housing, which we're going to talk a lot about today. Akira, welcome, and please give us your own introduction, or even a better introduction than we did.
No, that was pretty good. I mean, I wrote that bio, so that's kind of what it is. Yeah, no, I teach in city planning, and I wrote about Atlanta, although I've never lived there. I have family who's down there, but I've never had the pleasure of living in Atlanta. I've spent most of my life in Philly and the Northeast. So my work studies like public housing, public schools, all of these sort of goods and services that are supposed to be fairly allocated by the state but never have been. And so just sort of looking at how people can intervene in those processes to create better communities and neighborhoods.
Absolutely. So before we even get started, there were at least one person in the chat was like, wait, is this the Akira that's with Black Philly for Chinatown Coalition?
Yes.
And I remember we talked about some of your coalitions, but that's one of them, correct?
Yes.
That's right. So you got some cousins in the chat. So let's start here. Like, I think your book, I didn't get to read all of it, but I kind of moved around to spaces that I found even more interesting. So if you can kind of lay out the thrust for your book, Diverging Spaces or Deviants, and then maybe even start with maybe the role of some Black women that you covered, like Susie Labor, and yeah, how you reflect on your study or research of her.
Yeah, so the book looks at the full history of public housing in Atlanta. It starts with, it really starts with Techwood. Atlanta was the first city in the United States to have public housing and one of the first cities to tear virtually all of it down. And as that demolition was happening when I was getting my PhD up at Rutgers in New Jersey, I thought it was a really interesting case. I had always been interested in how neighborhoods change, and I really wanted to study gentrification. And that led me to the new version at that point of public housing, which was Hope 6, which there's a lot of in Atlanta, where they tear down public housing and rebuild it with private developers and management. And so I was really just sort of interested in how in these rebuilt affordable housing communities, mixed income communities that they were calling them, people who were public housing tenants had no rights, really. They couldn't really form tenant associations and they couldn't really organize. So I began looking at how the ability for public housing residents to mobilize largely through tenant associations had changed over about 75 years. So I look at 3 different developments. I look at University Homes, I look at Perry Homes, and I look at Grady Homes, which is how I came to know Susie Labor. Not know her personally. She passed before I wrote the book even, but got to know her work and the work of other Black women tenant leaders. And so it was like part of the demolition of public housing in Atlanta, particularly Techwood Homes, which was the first public housing development in the country that was built solely for white people. So I don't cover it in my book. It was, preserved as kind of under like the National Historic Preservation as a landmark. And part of the demolition of that landmark required the Housing Authority, now known as Atlanta Housing, to create like an archive. So they gave me access for many years to all of their records. And that's how I got to kind of know some of these women. And then Atlanta has a very, very rich history, a written history. There are lots of good archives and libraries. So I was at Emory, I was at Woodruff over at AUC. I went to lots of different libraries, Auburn Avenue Research Library. I was there quite a bit. And that's how I got to know some of these like personal stories, but also just like newspapers, Atlanta Daily World, one of the older Black newspapers in the country, was super helpful as well.
Peace, my sister. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And congratulations however you got your doctor's degree. I know that's not an easy feat. I got mine a year ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And my question is, one, the subject that you talked about, was there any challenge? Or I'm assuming you took your dissertation and converted over to the book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Was there any challenge in relationship to the subject matter, and then the methodology that you chose? Why did you choose that methodology related to the subject that you want to write about?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The transformation from a dissertation to a book is always difficult. You're just sort of writing for different audiences.
Tell me about it. I'm going through it right now.
Yeah, you have to, my dissertation only went up to 74 or 75. That was when President Nixon kind of declares that the federal government will no longer be constructing traditional public housing. So I kind of started, it's just 30 years. And then, so I'm adding on to it largely what happened with the Olympics, what happened during the Reagan years, the Atlanta child murders. So the last 2 chapters are new chapters and the first chapter is new. So it's really only like 2 chapters in the book that are kind of the same from the dissertation. I also just didn't know enough. My degree is in planning and public policy, and so I'm not a historian, and this is all like historical archival methods, a little bit of document analysis. And I really didn't have any training in like Black studies or gender studies, which are like very important to the book. So there was like a lot of reading I had to do in order to get the book to where I wanted it to be. And, you know, it's kind of like, I think of books like most people think of their dissertation, like this is one of many. Well, you only do one dissertation, but you know, it's kind of like, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be done. And like, same thing with the book. It's kind of like, you're not going to write the perfect book. There's always going to be more stuff or more archives, more people, more perspectives, but you got to write the book that works for you at that time and get it out, because it doesn't serve anyone as a dissertation.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
So I know we went there. I want to kind of come back maybe even to Susie a little bit more, because you talked about the climate around, or how far you went back in terms of like leadership. And so I want to kind of get your thoughts on, so there was something I was reading where Susie LeBeau kind of interjected to, I don't know if it was defend Maynard Jackson, like, you know, he's the mayor for all people and not just like for public housing tenant. So I wonder, would you call, like what would you say of Maynard Jackson's tenure or his time in office? Was he considered like a tenant organizing type mayor, like mayor that was leaning towards tenant organizing? And then yeah, just kind of talk about his impact, maybe even some of her, but his impact on the subject of your work. And then, you know, maybe you might even get into like what was the attempt redistribution of electoral power might have looked like or didn't look like. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So the part with Maynard, and I actually have a good friend, Danielle Wiggins, who has a book that is about Maynard and Jesse Jackson, and like really like does a good job of kind of talking about these tensions, right? Because, you know, Susie LeBoard was correct. Maynard Jackson was the mayor of Atlanta and not the mayor of public housing tenants. And so, but obviously he was like leaps and bounds above like an Allen Jr., you know, so like for him to be the person that you transition Black power to or Black leadership to in Atlanta, he was good, right? He like served the people, and he made City Hall very accessible. I found lots of things in his files. His papers are at Emory, I think. And I found lots of things in his files about like City Hall in the streets, where he would like go to different neighborhoods and open up city halls and have people like, you know, really try to like serve the people on the ground. But obviously you have a lot of issues with things like the sanitation strike. Later in the 90s, you know, Maynard was like the person to get the Olympics down to Atlanta in 96. And that was obviously very kind of like the final blow to public housing in Atlanta. That really facilitated the private development interest that allowed for demolition and semi-redevelopment of public housing to happen. And so, you know, he was, like most people, a very complicated person, right? There were some things that I felt like generally, like I didn't know him, and, you know, I don't mean any disrespect to people who know or related to him, but he was like very stubborn, which is not like, you know, it's part of being a politician, but he really seemed to reject people telling him like how he should govern. And so with that, you know, sometimes he just kind of dug in his heels just so he wouldn't have to be wrong. You saw a lot of that happening. He was very protective of his administration and his reputation and legacy in the city of Atlanta. And so, you know, he was the first. And so as the first Black man to lead the city, it was really, you know, he kind of understood the significance of that. This is someone who comes out of like civil rights and kind of understands the importance that we saw kind of across the country, as he was one of many of the first sort of Black mayors in the country, right? We have Stokes over in Cleveland, and Maynard is soon after. And then, effectively since then, there hasn't been a white mayor in Atlanta. So he kind of really kicks it off for the city. But obviously, all of these things are happening in public housing, from the child murders to the explosion of the daycare at Bowen Homes in the 80s, the demolition, obviously, with public housing, and as it relates to the Olympics, the general long time that a lot of the demolition took, and the uncertainty and evictions that were happening. All of these things were happening under Black mayors, and for a significant portion, Black women mayors. And so I talk a little bit about that in the book, about what it means to have these different types of Black politics exist in the city, and who it worked for and who it was less successful for.
So I'm curious, in your research, in covering the topic of gentrification, what did you, because gentrification is a phenomenon that's hitting across America, particularly Black America. What did you uncover that you probably already didn't know? But also, as you identify like women-headed households, how does that? Because that doesn't necessarily get talked about in this conversation relationship to gentrification, or like growing up in the neighborhood. Even though some of us, like in Detroit, we say 70% of the household are ran by single Black women. That statistic kind of it is shocking, but then it get disappeared because there's no one really like organizing in relationship to gentrification. So I'm curious how your research.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I don't talk as much about gentrification in this book. That was obviously like the aftermath of the demolition and redevelopment. What I was looking at was more kind of like what was happening during that redevelopment process. And I think it was what I really learned from the book around these issues is like the tension of someone coming in and saying gentrification is bad and we don't want that. And people who live there being like, okay, but I do want this to look better, right? So with public housing's demolition, people voted for it, right? The tenants approved all the plans. Not nobody, but very few people were like dragged out of there and forcibly evicted. People willingly took housing choice vouchers or Section 8 and left. And a lot of this was under the leadership of Black women who were the predominant heads of the tenant associations who kind of oversaw these decisions. And so I think that was difficult. And there were lots of accusations, as there usually are, when there's like a big development going and a lot of neighborhood change going, that, people were voting because they were getting townhomes or they had jobs at the housing authority. And there was, that sort of like, those accusations were thrown around, some of which could be true. I couldn't really find anything super substantiated in the archives, of course, but that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. But it's really hard, public housing in Atlanta, like with Perry Homes, with Grady. Perry Homes was built in 55, Grady in 40, University Homes in 37, So these were like 60, 70-year-old buildings that hadn't been modernized really since like the late 70s. Really low ceilings, really tiny rooms, not really great, if any, air conditioning or heat. Mold, rats, etc. So most of them were not built really well, especially the ones that were built past the 50s. And people wanted, and they had been dealing with Atlanta Housing Authority as a landlord for all their lives, and they wanted something different. So I think it's like really hard, me, I go into these spaces, I'm like, yeah, you don't want to, we got to stop this like development that displaces us, gentrification. And people are like, okay, but like, I want a grocery store, And so those are like, they're not impossible things to get over, but if you've been in a disinvested neighborhood for 40, 50 years, you don't want to wait 10, 15 years for like this organic movement to form to get things on your own. You want to like have the people who you pay taxes to be accountable and do something. And people for so long were not really getting that. Like every single thing that they did, from like getting a new high school built in the Northwest to getting, that little spur line to go up to like Bankhead, supposed to go all the way up to Berry Homes to go up to Bankhead, took like 15, 20 years.
Mhm.
And so, I think people were just tired.
So there's obviously a cultural celebration of the hood, the projects, and all these other things. And I'm curious if you could kind of speak to maybe your research, your work, and maybe even how you explain this to people. So your thoughts on like public housing projects or public housing, the objectives, how it impacts Black and Brown communities, those of lower wage and wealth. Mm-hmm. And then is there a notion that the city or the state is saying, well, this will cure Black issues? So I'm curious to know, like, again, how do you respond to that? And also like what is this relation to Black issues?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been in favor of public housing, even though, as I said, they're not building it anymore and they're actively looking for ways to get rid of it. Even if you go to like I told you Atlanta Housing Authority switched their name from Atlanta Housing Authority to Atlanta Housing. If you go to their website, it used to be that all housing authorities kind of had the same mission, which was from the 1937 Housing Act, which is like providing safe and sanitary housing to low-income families, full stop, right? And like, if you go to Atlanta Housing now, it's kind of like, oh, we're like a real estate developer that does like some social services. Like, it's a totally different mission. And so to just sort of like put forward the idea that we need public housing and not social housing or affordable housing or workforce housing or like whatever new name they give it, people who work full-time or don't work full-time are earning a wage however they get it should be housed, right? And we know that people can work 2, 3, 4 jobs and still not make enough to pay a month's rent. Or if they lose one of those jobs, they're going to get evicted, right? And so to me, it's always, and this is kind of why I've kind of moved away from housing, because I honestly just like can't deal with people that want to make it so complicated for people to have shelter. I don't think that it should be that complicated. And I think that if you are a country, you have an obligation to provide for those in need. This is not how people do things anymore, but I don't see public housing as something that's shameful. I talk to my students, I talk to people all the time. I'm like, imagine if the government just paid a third of your housing costs. And there's not a single person who would reject that. Right? Like, that's just like, yes, I'll take that money. Thank you. I'll use the other money, I'll use it for something else. So, we've working with other people in housing, we push these things like Save Section 9, which is happening in New York to save public housing. We push things like universal vouchers, vouchers that can be accepted everywhere, vouchers that go to anyone who meets the standard qualification of, whatever poverty level is assigned to it. And that's it, right? Like, the government has the ability to do a lot of things. During COVID, they gave everyone money. They got food stamps to kids who were on free and reduced lunch in school so they could have food at home. They did all of these things with little like bureaucracy. You didn't have to apply. The money just showed up. And they were giving out the child tax credit every month instead of at the end of the year. they essentially eliminated child poverty. It was that easy. It was like one switch, right? And to think that people would just rather roll that back and not take care of people is just like kind of bizarre to me. But no, I think that we need to build more public housing and that we need to bring it back because there are no there are no studies that show holistic positive outcomes after you're kicked out of public housing. Your housing is usually unstable, maybe you'll do better in school but someone loses their job, or like there's just like it's not this like band-aid. It's not like a cure. It is really just like taking someone and giving them like temporary relief instead of like a sustainable solution. So it's really people just, and it's not something that we spend a lot on. When we look at like what we spend the most on housing wise, the biggest subsidy goes to homeowners and the mortgage interest tax deduction, right? That's that's like 75% of like what the federal government spends on housing. Everything else, like Section 8 is like, this tiny line item. Public housing is even less. So like the money is there. This isn't difficult. It's really just like public housing, like public schools. As soon as these things were desegregated or integrated, suddenly they're horrible things that we can no longer do. And God forbid, whatever. But it's the race aspect. And then, as Dr. Shakur was saying, like the gender aspect. When you have a bunch of single Black women living in these developments, there's really no one who's going to stand up politically to advocate and continue to support the things that they use.
So you just pointed out the role sexism, living in a patriarchy country, contributes to the detriment of public housing and the impact on Black families, particularly Black women and children. But also, can you talk specifically about how the culture of white hegemony in this country continues to leave out? I mean, because some of the things you talk about, the advocate for public housing, some would say up under this particular regime that we are now, hey, are you a socialist? Are you a Marxist? Like, but I mean, in reality, it's common sense, right? That the government want to take care of its own.
Yeah. No, I mean, like white supremacy, hegemony, all of that is just like part of the fabric, right? Again, when these goods were segregated, when they were exclusive, when they could sort of pitch them as being something to help, back in the day, it was about like helping farmers and helping the poor, and they were assumed, or helping soldiers or veterans, whatever category they decide, that category is like automatically white. But it is also, in the early beginning part of public housing, like in the 1930s, FDR, this comes out of like part of the New Deal. Everyone knows that the New Deal did not serve Black people almost like exclusively, like eliminated a lot of, for example, domestic and agricultural workers were not eligible for Social Security and other benefits. But he did have this like Black kitchen cabinet. He called it his little like Black cabinet. There were a lot of like Black economists and Black civil rights advocates who made sure to like affirm any sort of Black inclusion when he did decide to give money to Black causes or to Black benefits. And so in university homes, they had this Black and white leadership, all elites, all people, who, from like Auburn Avenue, life insurance, bankers, etc., who were big in the civil rights movement, a couple of white college presidents as well who were involved, who all sort of came together and were very intentional about designing public housing for the Black family. And so they knew, for example, rents for white public housing were set at one rate, with the assumption that there was only one adult working in the household, the father. Whereas with Black families, they knew that it would be two people working regardless, and it still had to be a lower rent, right? And they knew things, and they advocated for things like, hey, you say that everyone has to be blood related. What about if you have like a cousin come live with you, or you have like a niece come live with you to like help watch your kids while they get used to being in the city? And so they made these like little exceptions for teachers. You couldn't be a single woman and live in public housing. Teachers, not by law, but by custom, had to be single women. And so they kind of like made these accommodations that they knew would be really important to the Black community. So that sort of like very sort of careful policymaking and programming, administration and bureaucracy was actually really important to make it to like breaking through some of the racism of the New Deal. And so I don't like give that up to FDR. That is something that came out of like local organizing and communications. And you can see Black people in Atlanta reaching out to Black people in Cleveland who were developing public housing, and in DC to get Black workers in the union, for example, to be able to work on these developments. Any sort of, there weren't a ton of Black architects, but there were certainly like construction workers and firms who were able to come in and do that work. So they were really big about buying Black and keeping the financing and the labor in the Black community as well. And those things would not have happened if it was like an all-white decision-making apparatus.
So we're here talking to Akira Drake Rodriguez, author of Diverging Space for Deviants, the Politics of Atlanta's Public Housing. And as we start to wrap up, I'm curious about two things. So I see a lot of names. I see Mary Stanford at times as a Black woman organizer. And so the first question is, would you or could you share with us some Black organizations or Black radical organizers who you would recommend us look into, study, or engage in the past or now? That's one question. And the other question is, you started to mention SAVE Section 9 universal vouchers, because I think a part of organizing is the ability to struggle with the state for power or fight for state power. And a lot of times political education can be done through policy work. So are there other policies out there that you think we should look into or know about that are impacting us in housing and public housing? So those two questions.
Oh, those are big questions. Okay, so the final one, thinking about policies and programs that are useful. I think it's really, to me, the biggest benefit of living in public housing is the right to sort of organize. But I do think that one of the sort of downfalls in organizing in public housing through a tenant association is that you do kind of cut yourself off from the wider city fabric, right? The thing with Atlanta public housing is that it was so large. Like in the 80s, like 10% of Atlanta's population lived in public housing, which is a significant amount. And so what they were able to do when they organized really did have the benefit of impacting a lot of neighborhoods and a lot of residents who didn't necessarily live in public housing. But that is much difficult. So we kind of talked a while ago about some of the issues with organizing in Philly. And because Philly has been a low income homeowner city for so long, we really don't have a tenant organizing capacity the way that other cities do. And so right now we're seeing our home ownership rate dip below 50%, and rents are going up, and people are like, I don't know how to deal with this, really. Like, where do we start? And so we have like a Philly Tenants Union, we have a Philly Housing Alliance, we have these organizations that are like slowly emerging, or not slowly, but they're emerging, right? But it can be very difficult. The grip of home ownership in the US, and Dr. Shakur, maybe this goes back to your question about like white hegemony, is that people can't like the biggest issue with like building a bunch of public housing is like people have this stigma, right? And they don't want to live in public housing. They don't want the government to take care of them, and they want their own home. And I get that and I respect that. But that's not always the reality. It's like, why do you have to be, basically what they call house poor? Why do you have to spend all of your money and time on housing and securing this thing of home ownership when really like rent control is like what we're all after, right? Like I have a house because I know my rent basically is going to stay the same for the next 30 years. Whereas if you live in an apartment, that's very unlikely to happen. And so I think it's important to sort of like pull out what people desire so much about home ownership and think about that. For a lot of people, it's bedrooms, right? I have a big family. I don't necessarily want us to all be living on top of each other. For some people, it's land, So I think it's like really important to kind of understand what people desire about home ownership and think about how can we build that into like our wants and our asks around like affordable housing policy very broadly. And then as it relates to, man, you asked me a history question.
Yeah. Even if it's current, like if you know some good organizers or organizations in the past or now that have more radical politics on this, right? And I would say radical in full revolutionary, and then maybe even engage in tactical non-reformist reform, but like organizers and organizations in your work or in your, as an organizer as well, do as people that we could point to, maybe?
Sure. No, right now it's like my poor brain is blank. I will say like Moms for Housing, right? They're in Oakland. They are really, Dr. Shakur, when you were kind of talking about gentrification and Black women headed households, Moms for Housing, Oakland is like slowly being cannibalized by Silicon Valley and the tech sector. And there's always good stuff going on in that city. And so like Moms for Housing is something that sort of came out of this, of these Black women, these Black mothers who are being pushed out, pushed deeper and deeper into housing precarity. And they have really done a lot with other housing organizers, especially like emerging. So many people are housing organizers by force, right? Not really they have this innate love for it. It's because usually their house was under threat or under siege. And so I think they do a really good job of kind of like spreading the word. There are so many organizations. Why don't I send you a list? Because now I'm like, son, I cannot. I truly am like unable to think of a single thing. This is just
no worries. No, I actually like your list be very thorough, because last time you sent me some lists, I'm like, I'm still working through the list.
Yes.
So yeah, I like the list.
I'm good for the follow-up, I promise. But like right now, no, it's not happening.
Yeah, Housing Justice League.
Yes.
So, yeah, momsforhousing.org. Yeah.
Yes.
Akira, we really appreciate your time. There's somebody in this chat that I think I'm going to ignore because I'm not sure that they were serious, but they said public housing is a step up from PEA, which means prison housing, or I don't know, military housing is better. I don't know. Maybe they're joking and they're doing some trolling, but who knows?
Okay.
But thank you for your time. Anything else you got coming up that the people can look out for? Maybe some books or workshops or
I am writing a book right now, but that probably won't be out for like 5 years. So I'm not even I don't even have a title. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously this is like really the time to like get involved with something, with any sort of community. Because as we've seen from the last 9 days, it's been more chaotic in the country than usual. So I'm really glad that you're doing this sort of like political education. This is like a really great show and platform, and thanks to everyone. I feel so old. Like, thanks for coming out on the stream. I don't know what to say, but thanks.
Thank you for your research, and thank you for, to do the research and write the dissertation and then take the dissertation and flip it to a book. I don't think people comprehend the level of work, the level of commitment and dedication, and then to submit it to get it published. Now you didn't self-publish, like that's a whole nother process and literary agent, stuff that I'm trying to go through. So I salute you for that, but also taking on a subject that is very important. I think when you look at all Black folks in America, our families have been impacted by housing, public housing, in some form or fashion, particularly in Detroit. Redlining, something that you kind of alluded to, it was very crucial in where we landed in our housing situation as a result of our ancestors, elders coming up from the South, doing that great migration. Someone asked about, like in the chat, did White Hegemony produce single Black mothers on, say, public house, or didn't? But in reality, I challenge that person to really examine what white hegemony is. I think the Manningham report could also tie into your subject, which is the spinoff is this idea of Black manhood and how the so-called the Black matriarch took away from Black manhood and put us, that was version of that infighting. And as you know better than I do, as a Black woman and Black women who are stuck with kids, it's hard to start over. For a man, a Black man, and men in general, I can go start over another family and job, which makes it, like the brother said, the public housing is like prisons. So it's a deep system that that handicaps not only the Black family, but Black women in particular. So I appreciate your work. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, and I do want to clarify, like, there were plenty of Black men who were organizing and leading these tenants. It wasn't like, I talk about the Black women, but there were Black men leaders in public housing through the 90s. It was not, I think that's like a little bit of a, not overblown, but it's not telling the full story. But I wanted to say, like, if you have questions about publishing and the dissertation to book, I'm happy to, like, talk about that. It took me like 7 years, but
awesome. I'm gonna get your information from my good brother Geechee. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
We going to class. We going to class with Akira.
It's gonna be letters I'm writing to my mother. So that's my dissertation, and challenged me to look at myself through my mother's lens, through a Black woman lens.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Reach out to me.
I sure will. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Thank y'all. Thank you, Akira. And stay tuned. We'll be coming up with the Dallas chapter right after this break. Go get a drink.
I'm throwing copper at the coppers, but I'm shaking like Morocco. Say my prayers with the pistol, serve the sinners with the chopper. All my buddies got it from scratch. My house had Betty Crocker. His mama owned D. He ain't even get no shot up. Profit is invisible. Profit come from product. He thinking buffet. He can't comprehend no potluck. God bless the child with his own powder to rock.
God bless the child with his own powder to walk up. Yeah, Fail, what's up, brother? How you feeling?
How you doing?
We cooling, man. What y'all got going on in Dallas, man? Y'all got snow. Y'all got the hurricane. I know Yusef, Hurricane Yusef just left up there. What y'all got going on up there, bro? How you feeling?
Hey, I'm good. First of all, I appreciate you all for allowing us, the comrades here in Dallas, Texas, to kind of grace this platform. So we appreciate that. And yes, I did have an opportunity. It was surprising to me, but I did have an opportunity to connect with the great Dr. Yusef Bunchy Shakur. He advised us that he was in the city, so I had to link with him. So I'm glad he was able to be in our presence this few days ago.
Man, I almost had to cuss him out, man, because he treated it like this was my first time there, man. I hadn't been in the city, touched down with him the first time, man.
Yeah, that's true. He did bring to my mind several years ago, at least when I was present. He been to the city, so he knows about Dallas and he knows where to go and whatnot. So most definitely.
I'm give him a pass, man, because he's been out here organizing, and they've been out here organizing for a long time. Huey P. Newton Gun Club, Gorilla Mainframe. Can you talk about that a little bit in the transition from those organizing thought processes, formations to where you guys are at now?
Okay, most definitely. So first off, I've been a Dallas organizer for years, for a period of time, and I was fortunate enough to be active long enough where I got relationship with some elders in the community, members of SNCC, members of the Dallas Original Black Panther Party. I've gotten good relationships with them over the years. And because of that, I had the opportunity to obviously read some books and to be in some conversations. And I also practice some of that which I've read and to try to see what happens. So I've been a part of a number of organizations, but of course I'm known for GMF Guerrilla Mainframe. I'm known for Huey P. Newton Gun Club, but I've also been a part of the Malcolm X grassroots movement too. Can't forget that. And so, just being active through conversations. One of my elders, Marvin E. Crenshaw, advised me. He said, "Don't never give up one of your tools," because we used to be like, "Oh, I'm not going to try that." And so, I agree with trying different things and, trying to figure out what works best for my community and my people. And I like to think that I know my community very well. I live in Highland Hills. I'm from Highland Hills, and that's community that I represent. And that's 20,000 people that live in this area, and the majority of them are Black people or New Africans, however you identify it.
So that's beautiful, man. As y'all can see, our introduction it starts out with Yafael's team out there doing all type of community work,
right?
Showing them brothers are real strong. So if you could talk a little bit about some of the things that's going on, maybe the renaming of College Park, your your Pampers program, and the Malcolm X grassroots movement. Give us a little brief into some of the programs y'all got going on there.
Gotcha. Well, first and foremost, as I mentioned, here in Dallas, Texas, the comrades here in Dallas, Texas, for the Community Movement Builders, Dallas, Texas, we have strong connections with the elders, and I think that's important. I think that's something to be duplicated. I know a lot of folks around here, just in general in the movement, don't really have a connection with elders, but here in Dallas, Texas, we do. So there's one elder comrade who passed away in 2018 by the name of Fahim Jabari Minka. He was the coordinator of the Black Panther Party here in Dallas, and before he passed, years before he passed, I had the opportunity to connect closely, personally, with him and another elder by the name of Charles Beasley. When I say I'm not just talking about myself individually. I'm actually representing the entire team of individuals that work with us here at Community Movement Builders. And so because of that, we thought it was a great idea some years back here in the Highland Hills where we live. We thought it was a good idea to rename College Park. Well, College Park, our dear brother, Dr. Yusef Bunchy Shakur, had a chance to actually physically go there the other day. Of course, he was sitting in the rain a little bit, but he had a chance to go. College Park is 17.7 acres, so it's a nice sized park in the city. Largely, Black folks go there. New Africans go there. We go there. So we submitted an application, and we had to get 1,000 signatures in order to make this thing happen. So we got out and started engaging the community. What we're supposed to be doing as community movement builders is engaging the community. So that's what we did. So we got the vast majority of the community that says that they support renaming College Park in honor of Fahim J. Minka. And so because of that, we have gone through the process with the city. Now, the city of Dallas initially told us last year at this same time, they say, we're not gonna name no park after someone who's been convicted of a bank robbery. We're not gonna name a park after someone who had a little bit of trouble financially. And so they told us no. Now, if we'd have been just anybody, somebody that could just kind of pass along, and they told us no, we'd have gave up on it. But because we are trained and experienced people in the community, we kept fighting. Now those folks, at least last week, agreed in favor to push it to a full vote. We got 13 park board representatives to support the rename change. And so it's going to move forward. We believe it's going to happen. And let's keep going. We're fighting as community movement builders. Outside of that, the Malcolm X Academy. I must say that I can't take any credit for the Malcolm X Academy. I have to, of course, thank Mr. Kamal Franklin, first and foremost, the members of our collective organizing body here locally, but also my wife, Talisa Shamsuddin, who is really the spark behind that, because that's more so what she pushed. She had been wanting to start a school. This is something, as I kind of say, it kind of fell into my lap. And so, with that being stated, I'm glad to do it in the community where I live in Highland Hills, because the people here need it. And so that's strongly what we support.
Love it.
So I have a question real quick, good brother, pertaining to the park organizing that you're doing and the renaming of that.
Right.
Do you see any contradictions in that level of organizing, as if less radical, less revolutionary?
I tell you, years ago, if you asked me that question years ago, I would have said yes, because we know it in essence is symbolic at base. However, what I do say is that I don't throw no tools out that I can use. And so if I can show that I can mobilize, or we can mobilize 1,000 people to support a rename a college park after an original Black Panther Party member here in the city, who would in his time was who a lot of folks was afraid of, then I can surely mobilize my people to stand against issues of environmentalism, stand against issues of police brutality, talk about issues of the houseless. So, for me, I look at it like this, because I like to think of myself as an organizer beyond that being a mobilizer. I'm trying to transition from a mobilizer to an organizer, and it's a difference. But I want to build community power. I want to build something that I can say that the community can recognize us as this grassroots organization that actually has the interests of the people. And so, with that stating, for me, at least individually looking at it, I look at it as a test. And so if I can do this, then I can do that. If I can do that, is hey, I can do anything. And so that's my mindset about this. My mindset is, how can I mobilize 20,000 people that live in Highland Hills to become a power that puts pressure on the Dallas City Council, becomes power to say, no, we don't want Cop City in Dallas. No, we don't want environmental issues in Dallas. We're gonna test it, and once we get this victory, it's about moving forward to the next thing.
Yo, I think that's a beautiful thing, man. I got a same question in that area, and it's probably a 2-4 question. So one of the questions, when you think about the youth and elders, there's an intergenerational struggle that seems to be broken around the country.
Right.
There's this argument around elder versus older, right? People get
Right.
older, they don't mean they're your elders.
Right.
But then I want you to kind of speak more to like your work around intergenerational rebuilding, how the young people moving in their spaces, how y'all engaging the older people, which again, I think is beautiful. My children's book, one of them, the objective was to have a conversation between elders and youth. And so I think that's a beautiful thing. But the other thing is like the knowing the pulse of the community and facilitating and organizing for tactical wins to build up confidence and camaraderie in those things. So for your people to see you to name something after our people, right, as opposed to venerating their ancestors, that's a big win. So kind of speak to that win and how people feel, and then back to your intentional work to rebuild a relationship between youth and elders.
Hold on, good brother. Let me add something to his first question, and the elder and youth thing. Can you also talk about why you guys didn't try to organize in the same fashion as those who came before you that you're connected with?
Well, I'm gonna say this first and foremost in regards to how I personally view it, that which made me humble. I think it's a personality thing too, and I have to thank my parents, my father Abdullah Shamsuddin, my mother, the whole Shamsuddin family, which I come forth, because I had relationships with older men in my family and older women in my family. My family, first and foremost, were members of the Nation of Islam in the latter 60s. And because I had that relationship, I was really accustomed to being reared in a way to where I had people kind of talking me through things. And so when I met a Fahim Minka, who we're renaming this college park afterwards, or I met a Marvin E. Crenshaw, I was more open to hearing this conversation, because that's kind of what I've been hearing my whole life. And so like I sit with Dr. Yusef Bunchy Shakur, and I heard him talk the other day. And obviously, some things he said and some things I may have disagreed with, but I was open to accepting it just based upon my experiences. That's first and foremost. In terms of the tactics, I saw the tactics of Mr. Marvin E. Crenshaw. And Mr. Marvin E. Crenshaw, who was also a member, original member of the Black Panther Party, he also was a member. And when I saw him, read about him changing the structure of the city from a 10-4 city council manager form of government to a 14-1 form of government, and basically giving Black people and brown people more representation in the city. When I saw him do that and he told me about it, I was absolutely receptive to it. But I must say, again, I got to go back to it. It's because I talk to these people every week, and I still talk to these people every week. Marvin E. Crenshaw every week. Fahim Minka every week before he passed. Mr. Charles Beasley, who, according to the FBI, Dallas FBI, hijacked the airplane in 1968 and attempted to fly to Cuba. I talk to these people every week. And so because I've been humble about it, when I got a chance to rename the park, when we got a chance to rename the park, and it seemed like we got some support, of course we went with it. But it's because we had humility the whole way. Of course, as you said, Dr. Yusef Bunchy, cool. There are some elders who are on some BS. You know, it's on some elders on some BS. And I can't say everything that they say that we go with, but we try to take the best out of folks and apply what they've experienced. And we try not to recreate the wheel. We just try to look at it from this perspective that we adding on what they did in 1973 here in the city of Dallas when they formed the Black Panther Party. We're just adding on, and that's all. We're just doing our small part. And our hope is through community movement builders as being the vehicle for the next generation that comes behind us. We're going to have to be open enough to share that information with them as well. And when we share it with them, hopefully they received it, and hopefully they become inspired. And that's our goal.
Man, sound like you taking this to church, good brother.
I'm just saying.
Man, you want to say, "Hey, man, hallelujah."
Hey, look.
Throw the child. Pass the collection plate around. Let's go.
Pass it around. Hey, look, because we hoping that this park rename and the other things that we're doing, the Malcolm X Academy, can be an examples. We're not saying it's the solution, so I don't want nobody to think it's the solution. We're just saying it's an example. And our job, first and foremost, as revolutionaries, grassroots organizers, is to build institutions that future generations can take and build upon. That's all we're saying. It's not a perfect vessel. It's not perfect, but it's something to work with. And that's what we need to give to the next generation, is have something to work with. That's it.
Appreciate you, brother. So there was Nakaya said, and yes, we have to secure lower stakes wins to get the real stakes wins. And also, this is how we escalate folks' relationship to risk, right? So we're actually in a training this week, and we were having a conversation around like our goal as organizers, right? We might have mutual aid programs,
right?
But ultimately, like, you are preparing people to fight, right? And preparing people to alter their relationship, as the sister said, with risk. So again, maybe speak to how a win like, renaming has impacted the community. What have you seen? And again, we see the work with the young people. We actually see how the communities that y'all in like are rock with y'all, right? But how do you see mutual aid impacting your ability to start to move people? You talked about being a mobilizer and an organizer and trying to evolve into the next thing, but like talk a little bit about maybe the objective of some of these mutual aid and these small tactical wins.
My wife Talisa Shamsuddin and the others that work with us, Kendall, Yamisi, Quentin, Kentu, everybody and the people that I didn't name, that's constantly working. We like to think that we're hoping to build an example so that someone in the community will pick up the mantle and continue forth. So, for example, there was a particular point in time in 2019 that we primarily now organize in the pinks, but across the street, as I showed Dr. Yusef Bunchy Shakur, is the greens. And myself, Devontae Peters, and other folks, Kentu Sankara and other folks, patrolled the greens day and night, because the greens at that particular time was having, just like any other places in Atlanta and Detroit, of course, were dealing with a lot of issues, a lot of elements or whatnot. So our objective was to try to push those elements out, and we were successful. And there were a few people, and I'm talking about young people, that saw what we was doing. I like to call my brother Bert. I'm not gonna give his real name, but I'm gonna call him Bert. That saw what we was doing and saw how practical it was. And if y'all know who I call Bert, those who may be listening from Dallas, y'all know who I call Bert. But Bert saw what we was doing, and you know what? Bert said he gonna pick up his arms and he gonna patrol the community too. And so because he saw that and he was willing to do it, that's all we trying to do. We just trying to create examples so that people can follow. And so back to the mutual aid, with the Pampers, the diapers, the things of this nature. There's a lot of folks, obviously, we know Trump is in, and some of the information that's coming out now, a lot of things are going to be frozen, or a lot of resources not going to reach back down to the grassroots level. So we hear. And if that be the cases, why it's organizations like community movement builders that's going to have to be on the front lines. It's organizations like community movement builders that people are going to depend on. Because I can tell you right now, if I go out there right now with some Pampers and diapers and whatnot, I'm going to have a whole lot of people that's going to be looking to talk about it. It behooves me for me to get an opportunity when I do that to tell the people about community movement builders, talk about the platform of program community builders, what it was founded upon in 2015. And so for us, it bridges the gap. Mutual aid bridges the gap. So, or survival programs bridges the gap so the people can have conversations. And that's all it was about with the arms we was doing in 2018. Had nothing to do with tough. Of course, you know, people in the community got more guns or whatnot. But it was about that conversation, because when I approach a young dude or a young girl or whatever, first thing they're going to say is, how do you legally do that? And then we're going to have a conversation. And we hope that we can transform that individual into a Bert. And like I say, Bert's still hanging around us now. You know what I mean? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create examples so that people can duplicate and get inspired by and become organizers themselves.
So we speaking to Yafe Balagoon, the leader, one of the leaders.
One of the leaders.
Because I ain't want to get your wife arm probably was gonna reach over like, let me get my respect. So my bad. One of the leaders of our chapter.
I have to give respect first and foremost to my wife, to Lisa Shamsuddin. I gotta give respect to Kendall. I gotta give respect to Cameron. I gotta give respect to Yamisi. I gotta give respect to Kentu, Jessica, Tamra, Changa, all the different folks that makes up that core of what it is to be Dallas community movement builders. You know, that's those people I gotta give respect, because those are the people that allow me to do what I do and be a part of their collective.
It's beautiful, bro.
Before we let you go, good brother, I just want to just say we've been knowing each other over 10 years, right?
Right.
Particularly in this world of social media, a lot of us meet that way.
Right.
And sometimes when we meet in real life, we're not always what we appear to be on social media. And you have been consistent and very humble. And what I like to say, also acknowledge a lot of different formation that you've been a part of. I've seen others duplicate that. And you and your folks out there have never been on the forefront trying to argue, make a thing. You just kept your nose down, your head up high, and organizing, serving the people. Anytime you in Detroit, you make it your business to stop by. Same when I'm in your parts, man. So it's an honor to call you a comrade. It's an honor to be in the same organization that you are, and that you set a model, you set an example, and you push the line.
Most definitely. Appreciate you all as well.
Appreciate you, bro. Talk to you soon.
All right.
So, brother, another episode down, episode 3. What kind of reflections you got, bro? We talked about public housing, talked about some of that Dallas work, and just even with some of your story at the top. So what kind of reflections you got, bro?
Actually, I think we should do a part 2 with the sister in the future, man. I think that conversation can go a lot of other ways, deeper, more into redlining. I think in the integral, I'm glad the sister made the clarification around men, and I don't think that was her intentionality to try to exclude men at all, but that was her choice to bring that into the forefront. But I just want to clarify that. But going more deeper into the housing dynamics, that we talk about housing issue, but not necessarily how it intersects and become like a prisoner to Black women and Black families as a result of, again, we talk about the welfare state, but how it undermined Black communities, particularly Black women, by signing up to. But also, what is the alternative? I mean, I think we may have missed as listeners when she talked about those who was left to organize. They kind of accepted their own fate, right? And I'm not mad at them for that, because you only know what you know, and we all desire to live in a quality house and take certain deals. But where is the alternative? And those who are creating an alternative, are we working hard enough? Are we out there enough to be able to do that? Because sometimes as revolutionaries and organizers, we are arrogant in our knowledge, and think because the people don't know. But as George Jackson said, the goal of the organizers is to learn from the people to help organize them.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I reflect on is, again, when we're in spaces, I think it's so easy to talk about, analysis and all these other things and words, but to be able to hold those things and understand those things, but also start to speak to common issues of people, like housing, right? People might spit the line, housing is a human right, everybody deserves a house and whatever, but like to be in that work and holding those radical analysis, I think is important. So it made me think about that. And then sometimes to be able to like look at maybe Black leadership, right? All of us, I don't say all of us, but a lot of us, Detroits and the Dallas, Detroits and the Atlantas and the Baltimores, have a lot of Black leadership for a long time, and there's not a lot of shit getting done. So I think it's important to understand why it's not getting done. And I think in her book, she covers a lot of that. But also one of the things that I'm always passionate about, like teaching people how public policy impact like certain conditions. So I think it's dope that she was able to name, again, like Save Section 9, universal vouchers. And even if there's not public policy on the docket, like how to pull people into policy formation, right? So we talk about political power. I just think it's important for us to be able to not only articulate policy, but struggle for policy, struggle for a social order that we want to see. And then lastly, I think I want to, reiterate, like I appreciate Fayo talking about, again, what they are doing to make sure that the elders that fit their politics, the elders that give them, some of that inspiration and source to keep moving, like they get honored and they get supported in a particular way, and they remain a part of the struggle. Be it if you got youth programs, you got older elder programs, there should be a deep connection to both if we really want to build power. So yeah, I'm appreciative of those type of things as I reflect. But
yeah, I mean, just as we get ready to close, I think one of the questions that was asked to Yafe when he said, if you asked me this question like 5-6 years ago, I would have said no.
Yeah.
You asked me this question, did I say yes? And it shows you the political maturity. It doesn't denote the ability to be radical, but even sometimes we weaponize words and how we weaponize it, we lose the meaning, because to be radical, it's multiple forms of that. But fundamentally, I think what we heard from him, because of his journey as an organizer, as a mobilizer, as a revolutionary, is to continue to learn from the people. And you learn from the people, you can learn how to be more effective. And I think you just brought up another crucial point that our first guest talked about, is the Black politicians. And I think that's a topic in itself. At some point we need to do, like here in Detroit, Mayor Coleman Young, the first Black mayor, he's like talked about like he's Jesus. And across the country, I think in a lot of other Black cities, these Black politicians are held in high esteem, and some of them rightfully so, but it eliminates our ability to critically analyze them, the pitfalls, but also we're engaging in their system. And I think we should, but we have not learned the lessons how to engage in those systems where we're not making the same mistakes. And what I mean by mistakes, of losing our ground, of standing on our radical position and preventing us from being assimilated.
Yeah, absolutely. As Andy Young tells y'all, his job when he was in mayor in 1985, says, my job is to see that whites get some of the power and Blacks get some of the money. We should be able to interrogate that, be like, what do you mean by that, Andy?
Absolutely.
What you mean talking about some of the money and all of the power? Anyway.
That's that Black capitalism, right?
Yeah, that's that silly Black capitalism that Martin Luther King would have put hands on him about. You know what I'm talking about?
No doubt. I appreciate you, man.
Yo, man, like
another dope show.
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you coming through. Synchronicity, struggling in them areas.
Yes, man.
Yo, but until then, we're gonna see y'all next week. Same time, same place. And bring a friend, cousin, granddaddy, and all of them, man. Y'all peace.